You know how much I love talking about this subject and finding the breakthroughs of the human condition, and just kind of jump right into it. Where are the areas that when we start to look at creating high performers, what are the areas that we want to look at first?
This is a great question. And when I think about this, often I go to the places where throughout my life, whether it was doing, the high level academic stuff or sports or whatever it was, that there's some interesting things that we just do backwards. And it's so hard because you see it on Twitter, you see it wherever, Facebook, wherever you get your, sort of public social media thing. And I see it and it makes me like I think, this is what we're all striving towards. There's things people want and they are going after it. And this is how we're telling them to do it. Whether it's, oh, you have to have grind mindset, you need to be working all the time, or whatever it is. But one of the things for me when I started my coaching practice was this idea of, can we actually go somewhere else other than like sort of the social milieu and say, are there good ideas that are lasting, that are principles that aren't going to go away tomorrow when they become less trendy, and that are actually helpful in this like really noisy world about performance and how we do things better, how we grow, that we could use and rely upon. And that's kind of where I start, is to say, not what are all the great ideas, but what are the few really potent ideas that will help us.
So I love the idea of principle driven, leadership practices, right? If I create principles that I live by, right? What are those principles and where do I start? If I,
Mm-hmm.
amidst the noise of all the leadership books, I read a book a week, and if you took all the knowledge you get out of everybody's books, you will be insane, right? Because every one of them has a different way.
Yes.
You should do this, and you should do this, and this one you should do this, and then this one over here. If everybody gets tattoos on the necks of the company, yeah, then we'll all be focused. They're
Yeah.
all there's just so much information coming at us, right? Sometimes
Yes.
it gets overwhelming. But having principles that we live by, just practices that we can point back to,
Mm-hmm.
do these fit the principles we're talking about? I think that's what you're talking about, right?
That is correct. And so, a great place to start, and this is actually where I start in my coaching process. Because as I thought about coaching, I was like, oh, yeah, okay, well, most people sort of start meeting with people 1 hour at a time every couple of weeks. But to me, it was like, well, what's the principle of what needs to happen when you start? What's most important? And so I think one of the most important things is that uh, we have to start with clarity, because most people don't actually know what they want. Not because they can't know what they want, but just because we don't get a lot of time to think about it. We get a lot of messages that say, well, you can't have what you want. Anyways, there's a number of reasons for this, but really we have to start with some clarity about, what do you want to have happen? And help people start to see that not as, do I have the right answer? Do I have the wrong answer? Am I certain about my answer? But to actually engage with a process. I think working towards clarity is more about engaging in a process than it is about like, oh, I'm taking a test and I need to make sure I have the right answer. And I can stop doing this thing once I have the right answer. So, to answer your question, I always start with working towards clarity. And what do I want is like one of those first important questions that we sit down and talk about.
It's something like I've always struggled with that question, right? You know,
Yeah,
what
that's
do I want?
okay.
What do I want to be when I grow up?
Mm-hmm.
Right? This world is so overwhelming. There's so much great opportunity. Well, do I want to be? What do I want my life to look like? How do I want to live? And I think if I just take it real simple, and for me, it started to create clarity was all right. How do I want to? What do I want to work on every day? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What do I
Yeah.
want to wear every day? Right? There was a
Mm-hmm.
time where I wore cufflinks every single day. Like
Yeah.
literally, I started looking. I,
Yeah.
I wore cufflinks and pants every day, and somewhat that was a time in my life. I'm not saying it was bad. Just I don't know. Today I'm a little bit more casual, right? So just
Mm-hmm.
I like to live a little bit more casual of a lifestyle. Not that I feel like you need to be dressed down, but maybe somewhere in the middle of the road. I give myself a little bit more
Right.
flexibility than I did when I was early on.
Hmm.
Maybe so when we start to look at clarity, how clear? What are as we start to build on that? How
Hmm.
deep do you go in creating clarity?
It's a great question. I think there are two important themes around the creating clarity. So I'll say the second one. We already talked about the first, which is like, what do you want? But I think the other important thing is for many people, if they know what they want, the other piece is like, well, how the heck do I go get that? Right?
Mm,
Like knowing sort of, okay, well, then how do I go after that? And so those two, that paired set of questions is how I start. And in terms of like, how deep do we go with clarity? Well, one answer is just we do what we can. So when I start working with someone, we actually make a retreat for them. We take
mm,
5 hours actually to get started because
yeah, yeah,
1 hour at a time, it's really hard to like, you'll get through layer one
yeah,
and
yeah.
maybe a little into layer two if you're really efficient. But then you stop and then we go about our life and all that and all the noise kind of takes up that space. And so part of it is I just give us what is comparatively a massive amount of time to think about it to get started. And part of it is just if you stick with a question or a couple of questions for that amount of time, that actually is, I mean, it's almost like a boot camp. Not
Yeah.
not in it being unpleasant, but it really helps us stick with something that the rest of our life typically doesn't give us enough time to like have the luxury of like sit and think and maybe either talk out loud with someone as in coaching or write it down in a notebook. Like I call this, we're sort of translating the dream because a lot of us have a sense of like we want things, but they exist as sort of a dream fantasy in our head. And so they're like not well formulated. They don't have to obey that there's 24 hours in a day. It doesn't have to obey like, all right, well, what's my life situation right now? And so when we start to write stuff down and actually say, what could this look like in the real world? That is like a piece of the work that we're doing. And it's actually something you can do without a coach as well, right? Like this is something we can try and take that thing in our head and start to sketch it out. You could make a mind map, you could draw it, you could write it in a journal. Again, I think very much that this is about engagement and sticking with the question because we learn things in the process. It's not about, am I doing this right? It's not about, like, well, there is one final answer I'm going to get to. Like, I think you pointed it out beautifully. You were like, yeah, there was a point in time where part of like my clarity was I was going to wear cufflinks every day. And then when that was like no longer sort of the thing and my clarity shifted about, oh, what is it I want now? There was room for something different to happen. You weren't sort of imagining the one and final answer of like
Yeah.
what it was for you.
Yeah. When I first started CDO Group, I remember
Mm-hmm.
the days where first it was I just didn't want to take another job and lose it. Right. In the
Yeah.
construction world, you go work for a company and you work
Mm-hmm.
your butt off, and then one day they stop building. And like, well,
Yeah.
we liked you, Anthony, but now we're not building, and they look for a reason to let you go. And that feeling of I worked it's like a bad relationship. They're going to
Yeah.
use you for everything good, and then when you're done, they let you go, and you're like, really? I just gave you my
Like,
years of my life, and
yeah.
now I'm sitting on the street looking for another job. And at first, when I started CDO Group, I just knew that I never wanted to be there again. I wanted to own
Mm-hmm.
my retirement. I wanted to own my future, and so it
Mm-hmm.
just was. And I knew what I was good at. Like I knew that
Yes.
managing construction projects was something I was really good at. So I wanted to be able to do that, for multiple companies and leverage myself. All right, I'll work for you, and I'll also work for you, and I'll also work for you, and the combination of all the groups that I work for, it would give me a fun foundation where I leveraged myself over multiple
Mm-hmm.
companies, and it didn't cause me that up and down. Maybe it did. I mean, I still had as much work, if not the ups and downs of it, but I was in
Yeah.
control of it rather than someone else walking in where I felt kind of powerless.
Right. Like in identifying the piece that really mattered to you, or like the first piece of something really mattered to you, of like not being in that position of being like, all right, done with this thing, and now I gotta, in the moment, figure out the next thing. Like not having continuity or sort of resiliency, something to be like depend on more. That was the core of your clarity. And there are probably multiple ways to then go about saying, okay, what to do about that. But and that's okay, right? Because what you
Right.
do with it is sort of related to the second question of like, okay, like, well, knowing what I want, it wasn't like you had this concrete idea of it has to be this or that. Then you get to say, okay, well, what do I think might be most important about doing this, and like spending some time with that question. Because one of the other things that happens to us, and certainly like social media and the things we see people doing on the news doesn't help, but often we say, oh, okay, I either need to do everything, right? Or, oh, I need to go do the things I see other people doing who are like in this business or who have achieved this thing I want to achieve. Like some of what they're doing might be good, but it also doesn't mean it's the right strategy for you. And so I think spending some time on that question, what's going to be most important? I call this brutal focus, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like actually saying, no, like if I try to do everything, I'll either burn out or I will totally dilute my efforts. So nothing's very effective. Like I'm kind of dabbling all over the place, but nothing really gets like across the threshold to be effective or get me the luck or the win that I need. And so I think it's really important to say, hey, we don't have unlimited time. We have other things that matter to us. It is worth taking some time to say, do I know, or can I figure out what is going to give me the most impact towards this thing that I now have some clarity that I want?
I
So,
think that I feel like that's the gift right there. So you kind of figured out, all right, I want to open a project management company. Right now, in the moment that you create that, the one, what I notice is that there's the big idea, right? I do want to
yes,
create that. Now,
yes.
part of that was like, when I made that announcement or I wrote that down and we started to look at, all right, as a project management company, all right, what do you want to do? And what service you're going to, how are you going to
Mm-hmm.
charge for it? All of those questions opened up, right? We kind of knew
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to do this. Now, I
Right.
didn't know anything else about the rest of it yet. I still had to figure all that. In fact, at the time, there were no outsourcing construction companies. There was no,
Oh,
it wasn't like,
interesting.
either you hired employees or you had a general
Mm-hmm.
contractor, but there wasn't like this hire and development. All of this was brand new to the industry. There was
Mm-hmm.
outsourcing your construction management as an organization didn't even exist. And I remember I
Mm-hmm.
would call people, and when I would call them in the conversation, we were literally inventing the company. Right. So
Yes.
like the more I communicated, the more I talked about it, the more I I identified what we would do and how we would do it, the clarity started to come through. Right. There was
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of that time with my partner at the time. I was sitting on the floor of his living room. We got, okay, look, we're going to create a construction management company, our development management company.
Right.
Now, what are we going to do? Right. That I think that's now you're going to go into what are the services we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and then
Yeah.
kind of how we're going to do those. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and you illustrated this so well, which is like until we actually sort of put a stake in the ground and say, okay, I think there is where I want to go. It's really hard to know what those other things will be that you'll need to learn. But the moment we do, then they start to reveal themselves when you start to take actions towards that. And and so that's a really important piece of the process. So this is funny that you bring this up because actually another common mistake about performance that we make is this idea of we want to know before we go.
Oh,
So
oh,
this
no,
is like,
it'll make you nuts. I mean, there's no way you can
oh,
know all of it.
no, yeah,
Yeah.
you're exactly right. Which is, and yet we have this sense that like other people knew before they got started, or like we have access to so much information that we get mixed up thinking. I mean, it's beautiful how much you can self learn like using the internet. It is actually beautiful. But the challenge is we then are like in analysis paralysis. We're like, well, I can read everything there is to know on this. And like, try and define it all. And that's how I'm going to control the uncertainty. I'm going to set myself up for success. And this stops so many people from like getting going. And as you just pointed out, you were like, okay, well, there were a number of things that we didn't know, but we were able to identify the question. Okay, what services are we going to provide? We need to think about that. And even then having clarity about the things you don't know yet, that you either need to, maybe you can research it, but a lot of them, it sounds like were things you just needed to decide. You had to make a bet and say, okay, I think this is what we're going to do, and then move forward with it. And so one of the interesting things about coaching, so we kind of talked about like, okay, get some clarity as you're starting, right? Yeah. And in my process, we really front load that. But after that, we do coaching sessions that happen periodically, maybe a little more similar to what is a common coaching model, like having 50 minutes or an hour, like periodically. And one of the interesting things that is a huge topic, not like necessarily directly, but like underlying it, is this sense of how do you help people sort of lean into uncertainty? So from a performance principle standpoint, if clarity is like principle number one, then another principle is really about like, can you learn to relish uncertainty? And I use the word relish pretty intentionally here, because there's like tolerate uncertainty and there's sort of accept uncertainty, but so much opportunity. And we have to recognize that like much of the opportunity there is for us in life actually exists in that circle of things that is uncertain, right? Like where we're not actually guaranteed success, and where we have to be willing to not know it all before we get started and start moving into that area. And so this is actually something that becomes really important in coaching over time.
If you're not willing to get up every day and do hard things, go get a job. So do not become an entrepreneur. It is, yes, you're wasting your time. I mean, seriously, yeah. I'll tell you, and anybody that's listening to this show, don't waste your time. I mean, like if you're not willing to get up and, you're not, the hardest part about being an entrepreneur is you have to work at this. There is no, look, even if someone gave you millions of dollars to go do this, when all of that's gone at the end, right? At the end of it, when you've wasted it all because you didn't earn it and the company will blow it. Very few companies make it in that way because they're not principle driven. They're not, the format of it, becomes one of wastefulness. When you are going through those early days of being an entrepreneur and you're learning and you have no money and you're rubbing sticks together and you're trying, in that gift, and which is not a gift at the time. At the time, you're like, I do not need any more gifts. I do not need any more gifts. I don't want another gift. Yes. I've got enough gifts. I've had enough learning gifts, or stupid tax, I call it. I've paid enough stupid tax, right? And but what do you do? What do you do the next day? You get up and do it again, right? Yeah. And you get a big break. And what do? You get up the next day and you do it again, right? Mm-hmm. It's just like a continuously. It's to be an owner or leader of an organization, it takes something out of you, and if you're not prepared to go there, or maybe you don't want to, I mean, like look, it's completely fine. I got lots of friends who love their 9-to-5 jobs and they love turning it off when they leave, and that's fair, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to be an entrepreneur,
totally fair.
Yeah, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you're going to go through. It's going to take some work out of you, and not just a little bit. In order to be successful, my judgment is it takes hard work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think your point about the stupid tax is hilarious, but also like, even just like there is a mental bandwidth weight to managing uncertainty. Like when you're an entrepreneur, the amount of uncertainty you are managing at any point in time, is a lot higher than, if you have a job and you work for a stable company. But I will bring up one really important thing, which is that uncertainty is actually good for all of us. And that's so right. Just to paint the picture, because what I've learned, I also coach people who are, not entrepreneurs, who are a leader or an executive in a very stable, growing company. And one of the interesting things is that, sometime mid career, what you sometimes start to notice is this sense of like, okay, I've been really successful. Like, I mean, things are going fine, they're going well, but something is not quite right. Like, something, just that sneaky feeling. And what it is, or what it sometimes is this sense of like, I am stagnating. So this thing of like, all right, the goal was always to get good at the thing and to rise through the ranks and to become whatever, leader of whatever, VP of blah blah blah. But somewhere along the way, number one, the growth pathways, like where we're learning new things, we're drinking from the fire hose, sort of dry up, because we think about that for people early in their career, but we like usually assume that, oh well, once you're later in career, you sort of got to drive that for yourself. But there's other things, like we get comfortable, right? Like we're like, oh man, it was so stressful when I was early in my career and I wasn't sure if I was going to make it. But now I made it, and it's nice to be comfortable. I think the third thing is that, we think we get to that level and we feel like, no, I need to know the answer. I need to know it all. And so we're unwilling to put ourselves in a position where we might get it wrong, we might fail, we might not know the answer. And so all of these things, it's like this evil, like triad of things, means that sometimes people hit that mid-career, even when they've been super successful, and they are bored. Actually, it's worse than that. They are busy and bored. And like, that's the worst, because you're too busy to do anything about it. And yet you've stopped growing. And this is where I like this point of like introducing some uncertainty, like a healthy uncertainty, not stupid uncertainty.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
But like becomes really important, even if you're not an entrepreneur. And asking yourself, what's my edge of growth that makes me a little nervous, where I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that's going to work out, but it's good for me. And it makes me alive. It makes me really engage with what's happening, because I need to engage because I want it to be successful, and it is not guaranteed that it will be successful. And so that's my thing about uncertainty. Has these interesting role to play for all of us, whether you're like at the more extreme end of like entrepreneurship, where it's like, as you said, you better be prepared. Like, that is what it is. But also, if we're like, I like stability, I wanted a job, I wanted to work for a large company, that's great. And uncertainty is important for you too.
Well, I see it happen with lots and lots of executives. They get to a point in their career and they go on to a defensive mode, right? They're not growing like they were when they were younger and growing and climbing that ladder. They get to a position and now they're almost afraid to make those wrong mistakes. So they go in defensive mode, and what ends up happening is, the younger bucks, the ones that are coming up, they surpass them because they're on that edge, right? They're taking risks, they're being vulnerable, they're growing teams. They're not the player who becomes on safety mode, and they still they're competing with those that are coming up that are still have that, maybe you call it an entrepreneurial spirit or a learning experience, or we'll take
They're
on
hungry.
they're hungry, right? That's right. And somewhere in there, the company needs us to expand, right? And in expanding, right, there's going to be some frustration. And anytime I grow my team, my process, what I'm trying to do in the organization, I'm going to step into a place where I don't know, right? I'm going to go to a place where I feel stupid, right? And that's when my judgment is, a lot of times I even get there. Right. There's times when I've grown so much. I'm 55 years old. I've changed so many times since the first time I saw a computer. I've changed so many different Anthonys, and sometimes I'm like, wow. And then, I'll set back I'll try to sit back and get in defensive mode. And then shortly after that, things become a mess, because the truth is I've come to believe that either you're growing or you're dying. And what happens is it caught, last year, I went through a really expensive cost. One program I was working on, it cost me $800,000. Right? When you think about $800,000 in the realm of that, I mean, that's a big stupid tax. And when I was younger, it's amazing how big stupid taxes can get as you grow. but it would just, I took my eye off the ball, like, oh, they're doing it. It's fine. I don't need to do, I got very, in my old days, I was in and on everything. Today, I'm back to in and on everything, right? Because I'm responsible for the organization. I don't need to do everything, but
Yeah.
I need to be present and in there. And my job is to be in with the teams and support them and see them. And even when I don't want to, like, all right, I don't feel like getting up and do that with this group, and or I don't want to go
Hmm.
sit with the accountants, or I don't want to go sit with the safety people. I need to, because when I don't, it costs us a lot of stupid tax. So, in
Yeah.
being in that vulnerable spot of continuing to grow
Hmm.
always, that's a gift. But I get it. Like executives, I get it. If you're there and you're like, I don't want to do it. I'm just trying to get to retire. I got 2 more years. I'm retired, and now Anthony's going. You've got to learn AI. Right now, if you're not working on artificial intelligence right now, if you're listening to the show today and you're not on
Yeah.
ChatGPT, you're not working on AI, you're not going to make it to retirement in 2 years. And in this next 24 months, what's happening with all the changes, you got to be working it. And I preach it all day long. I'm going to get you in the company and the organizations you're working for, make sure you're working. And I can't tell you how many times a day they're like, nah, I'm going to retire before this stuff kicks in. I'm like, nope, you're not going to make it. It's happening now. And it's time for you to
Yeah.
start embracing these platforms and start to look at them and
Hmm.
how's it going to affect your organization? Because if you don't, you're going to get outclassed very quickly. And those who do now and those who don't will separate so quickly from each other that your head will spin. So
Yeah.
I get it. So getting uncomfortable is, again, in that spot of, and I think that's where having a coach like you, Carl, this is the gift, is that you come in and you're, look, the gift is having someone like you in our corner gives me a chance to swing a little bit harder. Right. I'm gonna swing
Hmm.
for the fences because I got my coach there. She's watching me. I trust you. I trust you as a coach. I trust you as being able to come in and guide me to take those big swings. Because that Fred in my head guy
Yeah.
that's messing with me doesn't want me to swing big. Right. He
Yeah.
wants to keep me, he wants to be sit on the couch and eat bonbons and watch TV. Right. Because that's safe.
Yeah. And it's we all have that piece of us, right? Like so that the part of us that's like, hey, it'd be really great to just be comfortable right now. This is actually where I think it can be helpful just from a having a coach is an awesome way to go about this. Someone in your
That's right.
corner,
That's right.
but also like plenty of people at home listening to this right now, like maybe are going to be able to get a coach or won't get a coach in the next couple months, but maybe they've got an opportunity that comes up and there's their voice in their head is like, that sounds challenging. I don't know if that's going to work out. So there's a couple of things that I always think about. One of them is this idea of like, give your future self some credit. Like that, yeah, you're absolutely going to be coming across questions that you don't know the answer to when you take on that opportunity or that thing, or you lean into AI and be like, oh, wow, this is tech stuff. And it reminds me of math and science class in high school. And I really didn't like math and science class. Something like that, right? But like, give your future self some credit that like you can learn. Also, you don't have to go it alone. That's the thing. You don't have to be alone in like the uncertainty, right? Like you can ask other people for help, right? Like there is someone who would like nothing more than to tell you about AI because they are so excited about it, right? It may very well be someone younger in your team who is like one on one with the boss to talk about AI. Awesome.
Yeah.
Right. Like that is my visibility moment as like as a young person coming up through a team. Right. So we can think about it in all these other ways, particularly the piece about modeling for your team. Hey, uncertain stuff happens. You got to keep growing. I have to keep growing, like as the boss. And what you're modeling for them, think about how much longer then you've got a team that is going to be like hungry and excited and growing. You don't want them to stagnate either, right?
That's
Because
right.
they are making things happen for you. And so I think that's one thing is like this mindset of like, give your future self some credit. And you don't have to go it alone. Here's the other tool. This is more of a doing tool. So there's a perspective tool, there's a doing tool. And that is this idea of saying, can we be scientists about this? Okay, and I have to sort of reveal my bias here. Like, I spent 5 years as a total lab rat, so I love science and I think like a scientist. But there was this interesting thing as I was doing my PhD, and that is that when you're a scientist, you walk in the door every day and you don't know the answer, and no one makes you wrong for it. In fact, like, that's the whole reason you have a job, and your job's to figure it out. And then if you figure it out, the gift is then you have to figure something else out. You come in and you have to figure something else out. So, but I think it's a really useful framework with teams and even personally for people when there's uncertainty involved, is to start to say, what's the experiment I could run and learn something about this? Like, what could we actually try? And could we set it up in a way that we've balanced the downside so the downside isn't too big? Like, let's be thoughtful about that. But the potential to learn something in the upside is very high. So, like, even if it doesn't go how we thought it would or hoped it would, we would have set it up to learn something that would then inform what we do next.
So give me an example. Give me an example of that.
Yeah.
So like an A/B test, or
could be a total A/B test, right? Like, it could
okay,
be, okay, we want to release like a new kind of offering or service or program for our company, right?
yeah,
And to say, great. And everyone's talking about like, well, what should be this, should it be that? And you could spend hours kind of arguing in a conference room about this. But, and many people will be like, well, we don't want to get it wrong. This one seems more risky. This one seems more safe. But that's not necessarily how you want to make that decision. Like, it's a piece of the decision. But so a piece of it may be to say, hey, let's just take a break and let's actually ask ourselves, what would we do right now if we actually wanted to get some data about it? Like, would that be, and then you can brainstorm on that question. It just shifts the conversation to a little more like, we got to get the right answer, which is kind of a narrowing of thought. Like, that often when there's sort of fear and uncertainty that's invoked in our brains tend to be less creative versus switching the framework and saying, how could we learn about this and what we should do? Like, we could talk to current customers. We could run a small pilot. We could, and start getting people to just throw out like ideas about how would you learn about this,
Well, so I think people get the I don't knows, right? And
Mm-hmm.
my judgment is my brain has this thing it does. Well, I
Yeah.
don't know. I almost lose all my creativity, my ideas. I literally check out, right? And I make like you were talking about before, that analysis paralysis. Like, my
Yeah.
brain literally stops thinking. It's funny as heck. There's times where my brain will go 1,000 ideas a minute, and then as soon as I'm like looking for
Yeah.
one that's pushing me a little further out there, like,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden it's like I don't know what to do, right? I don't know. I get this. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And so, I'm working on another new company with a friend of mine, and we're looking at doing this an AI driven company for the development world. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we did a couple weeks ago is we sent some guys out to literally go try do some sales. Right, this whole
Mm-hmm.
thing was about doing some sales that were going to be B2B, and we just sent a couple guys out, and they literally just went out and knocked on a couple of doors
Mm-hmm.
and tried a made up sales pitch for an idea. We
I
kind of
love
did
this.
a
Yeah.
basic idea, and they walked away with a surprising number of opportunities. Right, it was
Mm-hmm.
just a couple of hours of knocking on doors. They literally just
Right.
walked in, and they just kind of practiced, like, what would happen if I walked in and just said, this is what we do. And, like, I think that's a great way to look at it. What do you have to do? Is anybody going to take away your birthday? So if you're trying on, if you're an entrepreneur, I was working with a guy who wants to create this new kitchen. I'm like, look, just go talk to chefs. Like, walk in and
Mm-hmm.
talk to chefs.
Yeah.
And but that sometimes that feels like, oh my God, they're going to take away my birthday.
Yeah. And yet, like, and I think your point about like when our minds feel the fear,
Yeah.
like, we come into that I don't know space. I love how you put that. And have you ever had the experience where When you have your own problem or thing that's uncertain, you're like, I don't know what to do. But the moment, like, if someone else comes to you and says, I got this
Yeah.
problem,
Yeah.
you have lots of advice. You're like, oh, why don't you do this? Do this, do this, right? Yes.
I'm a pro.
Okay.
You have
Yeah,
a
me
problem.
too.
I can solve your problem. No problem. I got 10 answers for you.
Yeah,
But because of mine,
exactly.
now one, so I think that's why the coach works so well for me, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
in my fire, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
in the day to
Yeah,
day stuff. Having
absolutely.
someone outside of me who can, who I trust. Now, this is really where I think coaching is where you have to look at a coach that you
Mm-hmm.
trust, right? Someone that you
Yes.
can be vulnerable with, and look, you're gonna bounce some things off it with each other, and it's or a therapist that you trust, or in life, having that person to play
Mm-hmm.
with in your playground is the gift of all gifts. And if you're struggling, right? If you're struggling, don't do it alone. Find someone,
Yeah.
find a Carla, find a coach, find a mentor, somebody that you can play with that will help you to articulate those ideas that you're having. And even in talking to them, getting it out of your brain or out of my brain,
Yes.
right? And just getting it just getting it out and over there starts to create it, right?
Mm-hmm. It does. It's interesting. There was this great book called The Extended Mind that was all about this concept of our brains think differently when we can get it out of our mind, even if it's like using our hands to describe something that actually gives us more bandwidth. So your point about whether it's writing it on a whiteboard, talking it out loud with a coach or a trusted, respected friend, are really powerful techniques to again advance your thinking, and move forwards. But your point about trust, I think, matters a lot because in some ways, and I think this is true of other, I think, modalities as well. But you both need someone who accepts you, right? Like kind of
Mhm.
like accepts you and everything that comes in, and like is like there is nothing wrong here. Like, and like you need to feel safe, right? Like you need to feel not judged. You need that psychological safety is more or
That's
less
right.
what we would
That's right.
call
That's right.
this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You need that. And simultaneously, both you and the coach have to hold this idea of you came in because you want there's something you want to shift or build or create, and and so also that potential for change and growth is there, and that is something that you also want. So there's nothing wrong with where you are, and there is also like something that you want and see for yourself, and you're kind of holding both of these things simultaneously. And I think that's just one of those interesting tensions, and also like a piece of the beauty of coaching, and that dynamic and that trust.
All right. So I'm going to go all the way back to where we started. We talked about
Yeah.
principles, right? So
Mm-hmm.
let's kind of tie it all back. So we talked about, starting with creating clarity, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
the more I can see it, the more I can
Yep.
visualize it, the more I create it in my brain, the more I can articulate it outside of my brain, right? I start to really creating clarity is principle one, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Principle two.
Was thinking about how do we relish uncertainty or get comfortable with uncertainty, like not be in the space where we're always trying to avoid it or control it. So that's principle number 2 that I think is really important.
And that's the gift. The gift is being in, maybe the gift is being stupid. It's okay.
Being
Right.
stupid
Not
is
knowing is
okay.
okay. Not knowing, for me, I hate that feeling of being stupid.
Yeah.
I'm learning to fly airplanes right now. And,
Mm-hmm. Cool.
sometimes I judge, I feel stupid, right? I'm doing this whole thing. I'm 55 years old. I'm learning to fly airplanes. I got to take this big airplane test, and it's
Mm-hmm.
making me nervous, right? And I
Yeah.
feel like all those voices from when I was a little kid are popping up in my brain. Yeah, you're not good
Yeah.
enough. You're not going to do. Oh my God, you're going to fail this. Who do you think you are? Why are you doing this? Why don't you just go back to watching TV? Right? All those insecurities will pop up. But the truth is, the gift of being able to fly an airplane around the country by myself or with my family.
Yeah.
That's that pulls me. That's the idea that's pulling me forward. So it's okay to feel
Yeah.
stupid. So
Mm-hmm.
embracing uncomfortableness.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Ready for principle 3?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. I think the last piece, and this again happens in that ongoing sort of periodic meeting of coaching, is this idea of how do you help people cultivate power? Like, and this, it, you can think of power as like, it can be influence, it can be confidence and a capability to just do things, right? Do what needs to get done. And I think it's so important. And often we have this thought, right? Like, and again, it's influenced by what we see on social media and all of that. We have this idea that, like, oh, there is a tool or a hack out there that just is just gonna give it to me. Like, it's just, I must be missing something, but if I can just figure it out, then I can just get there. But here's the thing. The thing is, like, being able to take a helicopter to the top of a mountain does not make you a mountain climber. What makes you a mountain climber is like climbing mountains and then failing to climb mountains and maybe even falling sometimes and hopefully not dying. But like, that is what makes you a mountain climber. Not just like getting yourself somehow to the top of the mountain, but not doing all of the stuff that cultivated that power, that skill in the first place. And so the thing is often people are like, hey, Carla, what's the best, productivity hack or this thing or that thing? And I'm like, listen, you don't need another tool. What you need, you have plenty of great tools. Pick one and use it consistently and persistently. And like, that is what we need to do. And it can be a really unsatisfying answer. And yet the beauty is if we let go of the fantasy that like, there's like some shortcut that we're missing, but that everyone else knows. Like the guy who did the hockey stick for his company knew it, and I just don't know it. Like if you can let go of that fantasy, you then are like opened up to the thing that actually gets us there, and you'll be willing to do it because you won't be thinking like, well, why would I do all that work if there was just a way to like take that helicopter to the top of the mountain?
All right. So you get clarity, creating clarity, get as clear, created, concise as you can. And what is it I want to do? What is it I want to create? What is it? And the more I can get, the more I can articulate exactly what it is. Right. Mm-hmm. And the better and the faster we'll create it. Right. Because we can see it better, the faster we can get there. Next is be okay to be uncertain.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So be in that spot of uncertainty and being able to make sure it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to feel stupid. Right.
You won't lose your birthday.
You're not going to lose your birthday. We all do it. No matter who you think, they all do it.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. So then cultivate power or get shit done.
Well, it's the yes, it's about getting shit done. But let's just to get more into it, it's really this understanding of when we are trying to build a capability or build a new skill or build the company, right, that we have envisioned, that there's a lot of different ways we could be successful with it. Number one, we need to not be looking for the shortcut, right? Most of growth often happens. It's compounding. It's consistently like putting in effort over time. And so that's an important piece. And I think there's only a couple ways that we fail at that. So this is one of the beautiful simplicities, which is like, we fail if we don't start. We fail if we start, but we don't keep going. And we fail if we keep going, but we kind of keep doing the same thing even after we may have plateaued or it's not working, but we sort of keep at it. And I call this the 90-90-90 principle.
All right, so give it to me again. So you fail if you don't start.
90% of people don't start.
Don't start. Okay, got it.
90% of people who start don't keep going long enough to really compound and do that challenging thing that's going to take more than a month's worth of effort.
They don't get to the end. They stop too soon.
They stop too soon. Then the people who are still going, 90% keep kind of doing the same thing without eventually saying, okay, this got me to here, but I'm now actually going to have to practice differently, or I'm going to have to shift how we're approaching it to do the next Like what got me 0 to 1 isn't actually quite what's going to get me 1 to 10, let's say. And so I need to continue to not go on autopilot, but I need to think about along the way, how am I iterating and improving what I'm doing in that consistent effort that I'm putting in over time? And I love this tool because the 3 steps are separate for a reason. Getting started is challenging. If we're busy thinking about the third 90 and how we're going to improve when we're trying to start, it's a total buzzkill. We don't start.
That's right.
But also, like, also if you try and start improving things before you've even built the habit of just how do I arrange my life or my mind so that I can just keep going at this thing that's new, that's hard or challenging, right? You start a company, you're like, wow, the uncertainty is like all on my shoulders. That's new. That's different. I need to get used to like showing up every day and doing this. I need to not overcomplicate it too much or I'll quit. So there is some adjustment in that middle period, but eventually you get like comfortable with that. You're like, okay. And that's that moment when you say, it might be time to iterate. It might be time to examine, is there something more effective I could be doing than what I'm doing right now? Okay. Are we willing to branch out and try that? And I think part of coaching is, for me, like looking at where someone's at, and I'm not trying to get them to like iterate and improve at some really complex level if what they really need to do right now is just start and feel good about starting and feel confident in starting and like have that success and recognize that success. And then when they're ready to like give them the nudge of like, okay, like keep going. Yep, keep doing that. Like, yeah, it's going to take some time, and be able to support when they're like, we're not there yet. They're like, no, but you're doing great. And like, it's not sexy. It's not, like there is a lot of like, kind of put your head down and keep going on something. And you can normalize that for people. Cause again, we have this idea that it's like, why didn't the hockey stick happen yet? You're like, well, cause it's been 4 months.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is how I think about cultivating power and how it plays into coaching.
Well, I got to tell you that having a coach like you is, again, look, audience, I can't tell you how many times having a coach like Carla helps. It's the most vulnerable place to be. First of all, you're an entrepreneur. Everybody believes that to be an entrepreneur, my ego has to tell me I have to know. And if I ask for help, I'm a loser, or I'm not a great entrepreneur if I don't ask for help. It's a flaw, right? That in itself is the flaw. Knowing that being vulnerable, having a great coach, taking a coach on like Carla that helps you really be vulnerable and know that you're being held, and having a coach that can hold the high watch for you, someone that can hold and see the bigger you in life, up in those tall, skinny branches of life for you, and be able to see where you're getting held up. And it's just such a gift to have you on this planet. I hope that I'm able to get this podcast out to lots and lots of people, because I think this is the gift of what you do, Carla. It's the being able to shine light and support others as they're going through these vulnerable scenarios, and having someone in their pocket that they can lean back on and go, all right, look, you're right over here. All right, Carla. Hey, I'm going through something tough right now. I need to talk it out. Yeah. Someone that's not my employees, not my spouse, there's no attachment to all the other stuff I have in life, right? Someone I can be vulnerable with. And, that's a great spot to have. So, Carla, it's amazing to have you on this podcast. I'd love going back through. Let's go back to it one more time so we can give the audience it all over again. I think there's a gift in doing it again. So, principle
absolutely. 1. We don't need a new idea. We've got some good ideas. Principle 1, clarity. Principle number 2, relish uncertainty. Lean into it. Principle number 3, cultivate power.
You are amazing. Thank you for the gift that you are. I will make sure that the audience down below is all the connection points for Carla. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the website?
Website is thaxa.com, THAXA. Mm-hmm. That's a great place to message me.
Mm-hmm. THAXA.com. And at the website there, there's a point to connect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And send an email, and be able to, if I want some coaching, if I want support, I can find it there on the website.
That's a great place. Yes. There's lots
Awesome.
of questions answered and other resources.
Well, Carla, you are a gift to this planet. I'm grateful. As always, audience, if you like the podcast, take a second, like and subscribe. It means the world to Carla and I. If you have a question for Carla, please put it in the comments. I dare you to come up with a good one. Tell us about your experience. Where were you afraid? Talk about where you were vulnerable. Talk about a little bit about what you went through when you're doing this. When you're starting a company. Talk about where is it that you were suffering with not being able to see clarity, right? Talk a little bit about that. And audience, as always, we're grateful for you being here. Thanks for listening.